Hey, Will. Hey, Zach.
Hi all.
How's it going? I think Drew's on the line too.
Hello.
We had some last minute cancellations. I think the zoning and variance committee canceled, which has confused a few people. So Libby might be, I think Libby might have been confused which meeting was canceled. But um, I don't know. Megan said that she gave birth a little earlier than expected. So
Oh goodness.
her daughter was born in a couple weeks ago. She said
Oh
so.
wow.
Yeah. So she has a good excuse.
As someone who went through that, I completely understand. Zoe was 7 weeks early. So
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there as well. Totally get it. Yeah. Um, so I think we can go ahead and probably jump in. I don't know if we'll get any more people, and this is one of those weeks, right? Um, Zach, did you have stuff that you had ready to share?
I do. Let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Okay. Really pleased with the uh, number of responses we got to the survey. I did see it was in the spotlight, so probably leave it open through the end of the month, so a couple more days. But honestly, probably could just leave it up, Zach, through the weekend, and maybe shut it down Monday. Um, at that
So
point,
it says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
okay. Well, let's see. I might have to make you a co-host. How about that? Give that a shot.
That worked.
Cool. So, what
Okay.
do
I
you
was going
think
to
about?
ask how many
Yeah.
responses we got.
That is a great first question. So we got 467 responses
Wow.
before data cleaning. So typically, whenever you do a survey, you go through a process, and I don't think there will be anybody like this, but you want to make sure that you're not including people that may have either taken the survey too quickly or done something else called stair stepping, or right looking at typical survey stuff that people do just to kind of go through things. And then there's a second data cleaning procedure that I do, actually using that comparison piece. So ideally, what would happen is basically the computer is smart enough to basically identify if you're answering randomly or not. So what we can do is basically screen out people that are answering more randomly than what they should be, right? So it's a pretty simple procedure that I do on the back end, just to screen out a few additional people. And typically, yeah, that would screen out, in a typical survey that I run, anywhere from 15 to 40 people, just depending on the size of the sample. For something like this, it might screen out three or four. You're probably looking at final sample of around 450 easily. So with that, I'll kind of walk through the high level things first, right? The things that people really are used to seeing, and then I'll take a deeper dive into the max diff and what the results there are, which I think what could tell a very interesting story once I do some more work with the qualitative comments. So first here, you can see the question is approximately how many years have you lived in Clintonville?
Hey, Zach, I think we're still seeing your email screen. So if there was a
Oh,
second screen,
sorry.
yeah. All right.
There we go. Is that it?
Yeah, got it.
There we go. Okay. So here you can see that that 5 to 7 years is the most common, tied with 20 to 29 years. So what I'll be able to do here is actually impute the information using the midpoints of these brackets. And we'll be able to get basically an average tenure, neighborhood tenure of folks in the neighborhood, which I think will be really, really interesting, right? So 0.6, the midpoint of that would be 0.6. 1 year would be 1.5, right? Two would be 2.5, three would be 3.5, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think the kind of range, right, is typically you're looking at 5 to 39 years, right? Once you hit that 40, there's a pretty significant fall off. And then, at 50 plus years, only about 6% of the sample. The question 2 was really about another tenure question, as the census would describe it. So do you own, do you rent? Question, pretty simple. So own single family, 92% of our sample are residents that own, with about a remaining 4%, saying that they are renting. So that to me is a little on the low side in terms of representation of the neighborhood. My guess would be that renter would probably be closer to 8.5 or 10%. But given that's kind of a little higher, that's still very much within the kind of the sampling margin of error, right? So no red flags necessarily, but I will take a little bit deeper dive into that and compare against some US ACS numbers from 2020 when they come out, hopefully soon, and really make sure that we have a representative sample. Question 5 was, thanks for your feedback. Before we continue, we want to confirm your top 3. So this was reported at 100%. That's good. That means that people were seeing the question and taking it as they needed to. When we looked at gender identification, we saw majority female sample, so 65%, 31% male, and a few others that responded non-binary or other.
Yeah, I was pretty struck by that when I saw that today, Zach, that how many of the responses were female.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but the reason why these demographic variables are so helpful is that we can actually look at their desires, as it were, for different infrastructure by things like age and gender, and really begin to pinpoint perhaps, if, say, seniors, just for an example, if seniors or people over the age of 70 really say that sidewalks are important to them, then maybe we should think about, okay, if that's the case, then how do we begin designing sidewalks, right? Do we need to begin thinking about senior friendly designs, right, et cetera, et cetera. So what year were you born? So here, there's a lot of numbers here. The chart isn't necessarily very usable. This is fine for now, but basically I think we have a fairly good representative demographic or representation of people across various ages. So everyone from baby boomers down to millennials. So what I'll begin doing with this information is actually using the Pew research organizations generational breaks, which are dated by birth year, to begin segmenting out the respondents by generation, and bifurcating those as well, so that way we can see perhaps old Gen Z, young Gen Z, etc. But overall, I mean, a pretty decent spread, right, which is good. Are you a student? Only 3 students in the neighborhood. Of those students, all 3 of them are pursuing postgraduate degrees, so which is good. Not a lot of students that were taking the survey, so not a lot of campus, which is really why that question was included, because we're at the southern edge of Clintonville. It touches the University District. What is your highest attained degree? So here again, we could see bachelor's degrees and postgraduate degrees are the 2 leading categories, with 44% reporting postgrad and 37% reporting a bachelor's. So a highly educated sample. I think that this seems fairly representative of Clintonville based on my gut feeling, as it were. Question 11, household income. This is good information as well. Kind of a whole host of ranges that you can see here. So everywhere from, what I would say is the midpoint's probably going to be ballpark 80,000 to 95,000. So I'll get an imputed average with an imputed standard deviation. So that way we can understanding kind of what that spread is of our household incomes. And again, this information isn't necessarily, we're not using it to judge the neighborhood or anything like that. What we're really looking for is, if there's, say, people that are under, $65,000 or so, right? While that may not necessarily be high income or low income, certainly paying attention to things for people that may be of lower socioeconomic status in the neighborhood could be worthwhile as well, or in vice versa, looking at those people that are, very well to do. If they have something that they're very interested in doing, perhaps we can solicit donations, right? some various ideas there. Lastly, question 13, would you like the results of the survey emailed to you? 83% of people responded that they would. So my vision here is I'll work with Andrew and everyone else to basically draft maybe a 1 or 2 page kind of summary result that makes it really easy for our neighborhood residents to understand, what did we find out, right? Basically from the survey in terms of what are their priorities and how are people looking at infrastructure in the community. So with that, I'll pause before I jump into perhaps the meat of things, but this is just kind of the basic overview results. Are there any questions?
So since I think a few have joined on since we got into this, can you just recap how many people we had respond?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then do you also have where those responses sort of came from, originated from?
I have not begun going through the coded intersections, but what I will say is that looking at the intersections so far, it's been a relatively even spread. I don't know if anybody on the committee has ready access to GIS, but one of the things I would love to do is actually geocode this information and look at this maybe spatially, right?
Yeah.
Based on some of the preferences that people outlined, because there might be distinct patterns that emerge that way as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and we could talk more about that, but yeah, getting those responses geocoded once I do some data cleaning and really getting the data in shaped in order to be geocoded, I think will be worthwhile. So for those that have jumped on, we received about 467 responses. Forgive me if my math is not perfectly correct there, but right around the 460 range. And with data cleaning procedures, I expect that to fall to about 450. And that's just to weed out people that may have been taking the survey capacity and not taking it seriously, or straight lining, or maybe going into the exercise and answering randomly or appearing to answer randomly in that exercise. So hopefully there's not a lot of those people, because we did confirm with people basically, like, yeah, those are my top 3 priorities. One of the things I would like to so that's kind of that intro section.
And then Zach, do we have a sense of we had individual links for different
based on some of the
different places people found out about the survey? Do we have numbers on that?
Yeah. So let me take a look here real quick, and I'll be able to tell you. Getting those pull that up real time. Do some data cleaning and really getting the data in shape in order to be geocoded. Hopefully everyone can see here my screen. 441 completes, pardon me. So we had 266 come from the email that was sent out by the Clintonville Area Commission. We had 53 responses from the Clintonville Discussion Forum, online sources on Facebook, and we had 27 responses from Spotlight.
I think this is pretty interesting in the sense that I think we always sort of think of the discussion forum as a driver, but the fact that commissioners emailed, their sort of individual email lists or whatever, that sort of consists of, are the big drivers of turnout here, which is pretty interesting. So the discussion forum contributed, a few, but and Spotlight certainly did. But interesting to see that sort of direct email to folks work the best.
And if we wanted to, maybe increase the number of responses too, I mean, maybe posting to Clintonville Discussion Forum one more time wouldn't hurt. One of the things I know with Facebook is that if you're a frequent poster on those forums, you tend to get more views up top than if you were, say, posting, the first time or second time. So, maybe even reaching out to an administrator of that group and asking them to share it could also increase response rates too.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I'll certainly do that to say, hey, we've gotten really good response rates, but if you haven't done it yet, please do and see if we can boost a little bit up through the weekend here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good idea. But I mean, I will say, I think 440 something is really good. And when I look back at the last time we did this work together, we're surpassing the input that we got both in person when we did a meeting and when the city ran a survey of for ideas from the community. So I mean, we're well above, probably a couple hundred above where we were the last time we did this work.
Yeah, and for those who are stats people, 400 is a really good number because basically what that ensures is that we're at the 95% confidence interval. So that means that we're 95% confident that everything we're looking at is going to be within plus or minus 5% of where things actually land, which is really good. I think, and the max diff, and I'll go over that here in a minute to kind of unveil that. But long and short of that is actually it's an even smaller sampling margin of error because people go through multiple exercises. So it's actually closer to a 3% sampling margin of error for this.
So does incomplete mean that somebody just started it and didn't finish it?
Correct.
For whatever reason?
Yeah, so we can actually take, that's why I was maybe saying 467, because I think there were several people that actually completed the max diff exercise and were tabulated in the final results. So, we could take a look at some of those incomplete surveys and see if there's any additional information there. But oftentimes, what you'll see in those incompletes is somebody opened the survey just to kind of see what it was, and they'll answer a couple questions and then they abandon. So for something like this, honestly, incompletes for this are pretty typical for what I see on a kind of a daily basis in terms of the surveys that I run.
Zach, what I'm going to be interested in is we did ask that sort of early question. Like, is there a particular place or a thing that you'd like to see happen early on before that max diff exercise? I would, if some of that 293 got through at least to that question, I would be interested in what their answer was to that, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next step with this is to actually is to begin basically doing some more analysis against the data. So applying some cluster segmentation work, and I'll unveil that here in a moment. But then using those segments of people and their priorities, as it were, and looking at those qualitative comments and really trying to understand perhaps what the link between their qualitative comments and their quantitative feedback were, right? So we can begin maybe identifying even deeper priorities around some of these kind of more general priority categories. The crazy thing too is that because the way that this works is I have individual level scores for everybody that took this. So I can actually go through and look at how you scored everything as an individual and really get into hyper detailed analysis if I need to.
Right.
But for this, I think, honestly, we're not going to need to go that deep. I think there's enough here that surface level and second level and even third level depth is going to be very fruitful for us.
Cool. No, that's great.
Okay, so now for the drum roll of, I'm going to enlarge this a little bit because I know that this is a little hard to see. There we go. So now for the drum roll of the results of the section. So interestingly, and perhaps maybe not so, and I'll get to that in a moment, number 1 and number 2 were repair and/or level sidewalks and add or connect sidewalks. So when I saw this at first, I was kind of like, really, sidewalks? That's surprising. But upon further kind of research about what's going on in the world right now, as you might know, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and one of the things people are doing is they're walking a lot. So cities across the United States, including Carmel, Indiana, which is not too far away, and Denton, Texas, have been getting kind of an increase in the number of people issuing or wanting improvements to sidewalks in their communities and neighborhoods, right? Because I guess so many people are out walking and getting out during the day. So given that this was taken, in November, a relatively warm November, that may have been top of mind too, because people were out in the neighborhood walking, and maybe they had just gotten home from a walk and saw the survey. So, but regardless, I think it is really interesting that those two kind of pop to the top. I think that, based on what I've experienced in the neighborhood, I think this is, likely true, especially perhaps in those side streets. So really interesting. Following that, number 3 and number 4 were improving kind of the parks and the aesthetic appearance of the neighborhood. So parks and aesthetic appearance kind of scored an 8. So to give you guys an idea of what these scores kind of mean is that these numbers all add up to 100, right? So basically 10% of the people said roundabout that repair and or level sidewalks is the most important. Right, so that's kind of a way to think through this in kind of layman's terms. But going back to parks and aesthetic appearance, again, I don't think that's particularly surprising given the fact that people are out and about and maybe seeing the neighborhood in different ways, right, on their feet, perhaps as opposed to in a car, right? A lot of people are staying home, a lot of people are walking. We know traffic is down nationally in a lot of communities. Number 5, slow and or calm traffic. I think that this kind of goes in with the repair and or level sidewalks and add or connect sidewalks, right? Because as a pedestrian, if you're in the road, slowing down or calming that traffic for pedestrian safety is really key. Followed by number 6, which is adding or improving multi-use paths, which I kind of see in tandem with number 3 and number 4. Adding or improving the safety of crosswalks, again, that's up high towards the top. And then planting additional street trees, which is aesthetic. Then we finally kind of get to the first, category, which is improving street lighting. And again, I will say this was taken in November, so people are going to be much more perhaps aware of street lighting. So this may be higher than it would be, say, in August, if we were to take this survey, would be my guess. But still interesting nevertheless that is kind of squarely in the middle. Then after that, we get to the things that are maybe less appealing to people, right? Improving bike infrastructure, adding safety, or improving safety of school zones, improving alleyways or service roads, improving bus stops, park and rides and or transit access, repairing or replacing curves, improving on-street parking, improving planted medians, and then lastly, that neighborhood signage, which was by far the least popular, which is good that that's there because that's what I fully expected would actually happen, because the signage in our neighborhood is pretty good. But we need to have something in there to be kind of what is the worst thing on the list. If that were to make sense, that made a lot of sense to me. So with that, those are the kind of the headline results, right? So I think the thing that's really interesting here is that, that's looking at everybody in aggregate, right? If we were to look at all 400 people, take all the averages, this is the average. But the reality is that we begin looking at these averages really don't describe what's maybe going on in the neighborhood, right? It takes a big group of people. It says, okay, group of people that have all these different ideas and opinions. This is what you say collectively, right? When in reality—
Can I ask another question related to the data, nerding out a little bit? So
Absolutely.
this is a top choice, most important?
So the way that it works is that—
okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So the way that it works is this is a choice tournament. So basically, you're presented 5 options, and you select of those 5 options which one is the best and which one is the worst. And you go through this exercise 7 or 8 times, I think, for this survey. And the idea is that in the background, the computer's actually doing math, right? So it's looking at what you're saying is the best and the worst, and it's saying, okay, we're looking at this, and things are shifting, things are moving, and then it kind of settles into the pattern of where your priorities are. And then for this survey, which is something new that I haven't done in this type of work before, I actually showed the respondent what 3 top items were, and then asked them to confirm that. If they did not agree with those, there was a note that, okay, if you don't agree with those, you're going to restart the exercise. So they were able then to restart the exercise to complete it.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is these are the top choices. Would it add extra information to find out, if, like the second choice, and we weight that at 50% or something? I don't know the math here, but weight that. Do you think it would move some of these around? Because for people, the first choice is one thing. The second choice also has some weight. Is the second choice just effectively discarded in this chart, or is the second choice weighted in on how these are ordered?
So they only choose the best and the worst. They don't actually choose number 2, right? So, to maybe qualm your concerns here. So, research on research, which is a nerdtastic thing, and I know that, says that basically doing it this way actually replicates in many ways kind of that rankings approach that people sometimes will do. But what this does is this actually uses some more psychology involved. So as opposed to just ranking things willy-nilly in a list, right? What this is doing is this is perhaps revealing faster preferences, right? So things that are not necessarily conscious decisions, but maybe a little more subconscious because of the choice tournament structure. So if you want to, I can send you documents.
No, that was helpful.
Yeah.
We don't have to nerd out anymore. What
but
I'm hearing is that like this is a representative of what's most important to people, and saying this is a ranking of the most important thing is probably misleading. It's just a representation of what's important to people on a weighted, mathematically balanced way that is probably deeper than we need to understand. But I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Please continue.
But
Absolutely.
I think, Will, you raise an interesting point, because I look at some of these things and they sort of go together, right? So you might say that slow and calm traffic are important to you. Some of the things that you would do to slow and calm traffic are also on this list. They also tend to fall toward the bottom, of this list, right? So some of the solutions to number 6, could involve 17, could involve 11, a couple other sort of tactical things. So I'll be interested to think about it that way a little bit. And also, I assume, Zach, we can start to connect where people had specific things they'd like to see fixed in the neighborhood to this list and sort of cross-reference, right?
Yes. So I'm going to go over one more thing here, and then I've got something more interesting to show you guys, right? Because I was just going to kind of get to the grand reveal here of, what's really interesting is that, again, when we're looking at this in the average, we're actually really obscuring a lot of information, right? Because we're just grouping everybody into one bucket. But when we begin to actually look at people and responses, there are actually patterns that emerge regarding those things. So, but before I get there, I will point out there is a best and worst count here, just so that way you can see it. Now, what you'll notice sometimes is that, the numbers here may change a little bit, like this may be selected best this number of times, right? But you got to remember, when it's done and selected best, it's random, right? Just randomly appears to the consumer or to the respondent. Sorry, I say consumer because that's the word I use a lot in work. So without further ado, though, so here's what's more interesting, right? Is when we begin to actually segment people into various groups, we can actually begin seeing kind of their different priorities, right? And kind of groups of priorities together. So what I've done is I've done something called latent classing. If you want to look up the mathy stuff, you can. But long and short, what it does is the math works, and it runs a bunch of simulations, thousands and thousands and thousands of simulations to really get at kind of where are natural groupings of respondents, and where those natural groupings are based exclusively on their answers to this, right? So it says, I'm using the goose to measure the gander and the gander to measure the goose at the same time. And I'm trying to identify kind of clicks within the gander, right? So these are kind of the clicks within the gander. There's about 40% or 37% of our respondents are really interested in kind of improving appearances of the neighborhood. The other two groups, about 25% or a quarter of folks, are really interested in improving those sidewalks and walkways. And another kind of 37% here are interested in really improving sidewalks and alleyways, right? So they have different priorities. So I've gone down here and kind of highlighted these things. Now, when you're interpreting these numbers, it's really, if you're not used to looking at it, it's kind of like, okay, Zach, how in the heck are you getting at this? So when I look at these numbers, I kind of try to look for a natural number that's a kind of a clean break off point, right? Like, okay, if I'm looking at these, if there's a bunch that are clustered around like 6, and there's some that are high and some that are lower than 6, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe 6 is kind of that middle ground where we're identifying things that are just kind of throwaway things where it's like, this is in the middle, I don't really care, right? Versus kind of what are those really important things, right? And what's interesting here is that we actually look at this chart. the importance of these numbers are magnitudes basically. So, if you look at, say, this 15%, these people really care about this more than the other groups care about their things, right? So that's really important to denote as well. So when I was looking at this information, you can see here, this kind of first group, this group that's about 37%, really cared about, firstly, about improving that aesthetic appearance of streetscapes and major commercial corridors, right? They really are concerned with the look of the neighborhood, followed by improving existing parks, which when you think about improving the aesthetic appearance and improving parks, those things kind of go hand in hand, right? You improve the look of the neighborhood and you improve the parks in the neighborhood, everything's going to be a lot more pretty. There was improving existing and or multi-use paths. So multi-use paths kind of go through some of those parks and through some of the neighborhoods, right? So if you're using the street and you're riding your bike around, right? Having those multi-use paths and looking at beautiful things as you're riding around is important to this group. Lastly, and this was interesting because this is the only group that thought this, was planting additional street trees, right? Which I think goes hand in hand with the aesthetic experience of the community. So the second group over here, let me actually pause. Is there any questions kind of about the approach and how you look at this and why I highlighted these things?
I don't know if you can see me. I came late, sorry. But I kind of was looking at street trees as traffic calming also. When I did my thing. So I don't know if that's something we could think about, but a lot of the things I read is that having more street trees calms traffic.
Yeah, kind of the beauty of this is that, everybody, this is maybe where my experience as a researcher comes in, right? Everybody comes in with these surveys kind of with an idea of what they think it means, right? And I think the thing that's really interesting is that I think the qualitative comments, and when we begin pairing some of this, quantitative information with the qualitative information, will maybe help us, flesh out what these people are saying even more, right? And really providing some really good qualitative context and, even their locations of where these people are located, right? Because these people are kind of scattered throughout the neighborhood, but they have these kind of opinions, then okay, well then maybe this is an neighborhood-wide thing, right? Versus, and we'll get to the alleyways here in a moment, but like improving the alleyways, maybe there's a group of people that desperately need alleyway improvement, and this is kind of their way of telling us, looking at the geography of where these people are located, right? So again, you try, I know it's really hard to be like, okay, well, we're all in this committee, we all know these things inside and out, but people may be interpreting these things in their own kind of rose-colored glasses, as it were. So when thinking through these things, it's the challenge is really being open-minded as much as possible to maybe like, oh, my next door neighbor Susie may think this way about this option. Does that make sense?
Hey, Zach, you are planning on trying to cluster where the responses are coming from. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is the mathematical clusters here, right? So these are the people that answered the max diff portion of the survey, and they're clustered mathematically based on their responses to their priorities.
Yeah, I meant GIS type clustering, like seeing where this is coming from, because like District 9 has very few alleys. So improving alleyways and service roads wouldn't be super important to District 9 because we have one alley, I think.
Yeah, and that would be what I would like to do, right? Because again, like I mentioned earlier, everybody has individualized utilities or scores, as it were, for everything on this list. So I can actually look and pick apart that information on those utilities based on where people said their closest cross street or address was.
Wow.
Yeah, I can, and yeah, so if you need some GIS support, Zach, I can help you out with that.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it looks sneaky simple, but there's a lot that could be done with it.
Yeah, you're way past where I could ever be, Zach. It looks great.
So yeah, so if there are no more questions, so I'll talk to the second and third groups here. So the second group, which is again kind of 25% of people, so they are the add and or connect sidewalks, right? It's not necessarily, repairing or leveling, but it's actually the priority is connecting sidewalks, right? So I'm going to see, this is really interesting, right? Because we know that there's some broken sidewalks in the neighborhood, in the community, various places throughout. So looking to see maybe where these people live could be really interesting because it would give us a clue on maybe where there's the most kind of broken areas of sidewalk and maybe do sidewalk surveys, et cetera, right? Followed by repair and or level or slow and or calm traffic. So if you have a lot of kind of broken sidewalks, you may be stepping into the street quite often to actually walk on pavement as opposed to walking on a sidewalk or walk through somebody's yard. So if they're stepping into the street and cars are whizzing by, it would make sense that they would want to slow down traffic.
Or they might not even have a sidewalk to walk on, which is
Exactly.
most of North Clintonville.
Right.
Repair or levels third, followed by add or improve safety of crosswalks. So, add or improve, this could be really interesting, right? And this is where the qualitative comments could really come in to help, is because if it's adding crosswalks or improving crosswalks, those are two different things, obviously. But we can begin looking into that with a little more information, a little more detail, as it were. The last group was really most concerned with repairing or leveling existing sidewalks, followed by connecting or adding sidewalks, right? So they are placed a much higher priority on repairing or leveling sidewalks even before adding or connecting sidewalks, which I thought was interesting. Then the third thing on their list is improving, again, those alleys, or pardon me, improving alleys or service roads, right? So these may be people that are living in communities where that may be either older with, improving those older sidewalks. I don't know. We'll have to do more digging here, but nonetheless, I still think it's interesting that these were kind of the three groups that the math told me emerged. Now, what I will say is that as I go through and maybe remove respondents, these clusters, believe it or not, could get even more powerful or even more consistent, especially if I remove people that may be answering randomly from this exercise. In addition to that, too, looking at this information with GIS could be, when I did a survey for the Wineland Park community, one of the most illuminating pieces was actually looking at the way people perceived safety in the community, and told us where they felt safe and where they didn't feel safe. And then using some clustering segmentation, applying that, using the GIS and actually overlaying those two things with each other, told a very interesting story. So I think there's a lot of space for analysis of this. I'm really looking forward to breaking this apart even more, and really trying to understand what the community is trying to tell us.
Zach, thanks for that really amazing overview and just a kind of a hint at what's to come as we close the survey and dig in a little bit deeper. So, we'll keep the survey open probably through this weekend. I multitasked here while we're going through this and put a post out there to discussion forum. Libby, would you be able to just put a reminder maybe on the area commission's page and just say, hey, here's the last couple of days to take the survey. I said we keep it up through the end of the week, which is obviously the first of the month. In all reality, I think let's just keep it open through the weekend and see what responses come in and shut it down Monday. But I always like to set a bit of a short deadline to get people to take it, click through and take it. So I just posted that to the discussion forum. If you, Libby, could put it on the area commission's page one more time.
Absolutely. I'll get that done.
And then I guess next month we'll come back with maybe some greater insights, perhaps, to all this information, which is great. And Zach, let's just connect early next week about GIS and how I could help with that. And then
So,
I think we
can
have.
I make
Yeah, go ahead. Will, go ahead.
a couple observations that I thought I made? I thought, like, looking at not the segmented sections, but the overall section, like the most important thing were people for sidewalks, multi-use paths, basically quality of life, moving around the neighborhood outside of a car. I didn't see anything even remotely near the top about parking. Parking was at the bottom. I'm not sure how many questions that we asked about, traffic congestion and would you like to be able to drive faster? So I'm not sure that was a realistic, but parking certainly was on there. And it's just interesting to me that we make so many decisions in this neighborhood
Mhm.
to prioritize parking at the expense of everything else. And it's not important to anybody. I mean, maybe when they can't park, it'll become, I just don't know. But, and traffic also, like congestion. Zach, maybe you can tell me more about, like, do we ask questions about, improve throughput of traffic, wait, or things
Yeah.
related to that?
Yeah,
We
and then
did
I
not-
guess Zach, there's a first question where we asked about specific, and this could be anything, right? So we didn't give them a list to choose from. It was anything that was on their mind. And that'll be an interesting one to fully, crunch as well.
Yeah, we didn't have anything specifically in the max diff regarding parking or regarding like flow of traffic, as it were. There were some items that were potentially on the list, but those I think were cut in the other meeting that we had. As were things on rain gardens. Looking at those qualitative comments, we'll make sure to look at those and see if there's things there. When I was at least reading through the qualitative comments initially, this is several weeks ago, so forgive me. I didn't really see much in there about parking. And I sent those. I sent a list of those over to Andrew, and I don't recall seeing much in there. Do you?
Yeah, no, I don't. And that's one of the reasons we asked that qualitative question, because it would be like, choose anything, whatever's on your mind, and not constrain you in any way, shape, or form. So I think it'll be interesting to compare those results against the priorities that people picked. And I also assume that those people we can sort of track, right? If someone answered this question to the qualitative, we can attach their answer to the quantitative and just see how those crosstabs may interact with each other.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'll admit that was a little bit cynical going into this, thinking if you ask people what they want, they're going to say, I want a place, I want to be able to park my car more easily, and I don't want to be stuck in traffic. And I was really surprised to see that parking, I guess traffic's not on there, but it's so far down. It really highlights again to me that we have our priorities mixed up when we shut down every development, every improvement, because what it could do to parking, where people are going to park, and what it can do to traffic congestion. It would be, I don't know if we can use this survey to inform some other decisions besides just what we do as like UIRF improvements. Should we, obviously we're going to use it to inform, should we invest more in sidewalks or should we invest more in park improvements or like that? But it could also be used to, do we approve this variance? Do people care that much about parking, or would they rather have the better neighborhood, the neighborhood fabric?
Yeah.
So I'll leave it.
Yeah, no,
I'll leave it there.
I think it's an interesting point. And, the other GIS thing that we can do, Zach, is probably pull down the city's sidewalk layer. It'll show where in the neighborhood we have sidewalks and where in the neighborhood we don't have sidewalks. And then sort of compare those data results geographically where people were sort of complaining about those, and really get the sense of whether they're talking about repair of sidewalks, which is hard, or sidewalks, which is easier in some ways.
Well, and my district, for the most part, doesn't have a huge parking problem. I see it more down in District 1. But I would say my gut feeling is that if people were really concerned about parking, they would make room on their housing lot for parking. And a lot of people end up using their garages either for storage or having no garages, which I can't I can't identify with, but that's but maybe it's because they don't see it as a problem. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Zach raised the point earlier, which was that I think people are walking around their neighborhoods more than they've ever done before, and maybe some of that'll stick.
You know, so I'm just doing a quick look at the qualitative comments here just to see. So I'm halfway through. People I've looked at, just doing a quick find on park, right, to get parking or park, right, just generally. And I see roughly 8 comments, and of those 8, 5 are like, oh yeah, more parking, but there's like several that are like less parking, and there's one that's like, and really the only one that are more parking have actually more parking to do with, perhaps those really congested areas that are popular. The one that came up notably was the area over at North Broad and High, right? That area, or not North Broad, where the
North Broadway.
Where is Catalina's?
Yeah, so Oakland Park, North Broadway, and
Kenworth.
High.
Yeah.
And then there was another one that mentioned the movie theater, Studio 35.
Sure.
Right, parking there. Those are the only 2 parking comments. They're like, we need more parking. There was one that's like, people seem to believe they can control who parks in front of their house, and that's just ridiculous.
Yes.
That was one about
but they seem to think they own the spots in front of their house.
So
and
there's that.
Yes.
And then somebody said there's a studio that said less parking. So I'm just halfway through, and so that's kind of the parking comments.
Yeah, it's
so not a lot of more parking.
Yeah. Well, I want to give Will some time to talk about some bike stuff that came up this month. I guess there's one last thing to do, and Zach, I'm sure you can help us with this. Jim, I'm correct. We have 2 gift certificates to give out to 2 randomly selected people, correct?
We can select them real time here if you'd like.
Well, let's wait till we get all of them in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
2 $25 gift certificates.
All right. Right on. We'll pick those next week. Jim, we just communicate with you on that?
Yeah. And I'll make sure I'll chat with Michelle about it too, to figure out how they want to. I'm guessing it's just a matter of sharing an email.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds good. So Will, I don't know what the city is calling this project, but the next item on our agenda was Will was able to go to an Olentangy Trail completion public meeting that was, I think, geared toward bike advocacy.
I don't even know if it was a public meeting. I think it was by invite.
Okay.
I got the sense afterwards that it was, because there was me and there was another bike advocate and one other kind of non-city person there. Is mostly city people.
Got it.
And they were presenting and asking questions. Andrew, do you have a map handy of or I can share, like, I don't have anything great as far as a map goes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I do. Why don't you give us the rundown of the meeting, and I can probably.
If you could just find a map that shows like the area that we're looking at.
Yeah.
I don't see anything that even has the options that I have, but the meeting was talking about the Olentangy Trail connection to complete that last broken piece of the trail that currently goes across North Broadway at, I forget the name of that side street, Milton, is that right?
Yes, Milton.
So they're trying to connect the trail and eliminate the on-street portion of the trail. So the solution is all the solutions involve bridges across the river before and after North Broadway, and then using and building a multi-use trail that crosses North Broadway by the Ohio Health, new Ohio Health campus and the new freeway entrance ramps. And they presented like 4 different variations of that crossing. Yeah, this looks like, oh,
How's that?
well, this is different than,
This is what I had in my file, so I don't know.
that looks like a roundabout.
What's that?
The North Broadway crossing.
No, that's not a roundabout. It's
Oh.
just a large intersection.
Yeah, I think that's what
Okay,
was
can
built.
you
Yeah.
zoom in on that some
Yeah.
more? Okay. So they had 3 different variations of where those bridges went. Like you can see the one to the north, and then the one to the south. That's one variation. There was another variation where that bridge to the south was diagonal. And there were variations that, like where the red dotted line below went along the bottom of the parking lot and then went as a side path along the service drive, and one where it remained on the right side of the parking lot. And but they all crossed Olentangy River Road at that crossing point. So basically, the points that I emphasize with them are that that the variation that goes along the bottom of the Ohio Health parking lot and then goes straight up was off the table, in my opinion, because it had more conflict points with, it had 2 additional conflict points with cars coming in and out of the parking lot. But that left 3 variations of various crossings of the river. I don't know if I can do like a, oh, I can do an annotate.
Yeah, I think you can annotate this. and
Okay.
delete. Yeah.
So there was one variation
Yep. Got it.
that like that kind of crossed, the bridge was crossed like that. Then
Mhm,
there was this variation that crossed down here.
mhm.
I can't remember the details of all of them, but they're basically, but they all had this major Achilles heel of this crossing here. And so like this crossing, I made the point that that crossing alone could negate any safety improvements of getting the trail off the on-road segments. Because I feel like the blue segment is fairly safe. I use it a lot. I see people use it. It has a lot of traffic. There's a lot of awareness by just volume of people. And it feels very safe to me. It feels like ride without a helmet safe.
Mhm.
Is sort of my metric about how safe I feel. And so my point was, if they mess up that crossing with the Ohio Health exit and the freeway entrance ramps, they could easily make a situation that's more dangerous than currently exists. So I said, basically my go to the mat, do not give up the fight, is there has to be a non-conflict crossing. Either that means either all conflicting movements of cars are stopped or a pedestrian only segment. Like they cannot build that crossing where right turning cars have to yield to pedestrians and people on bikes. That will be super dangerous. I've seen it just doesn't work.
Yeah, just
It doesn't.
no turn on red, no continuous green, that kind of thing. A pedestrian only.
Right, either a pedestrian only segment, or when the pedestrians have segment, the car movement is non-conflicting, like coming left out of the exit
Mhm.
Of Ohio Health. But so I emphasize that. And then we talked about the real main benefit in my mind of this is that you get 2 bridges across the river and you connect the Ohio Health Complex, a job center with a big population center. with Clintonville, and it almost connects the hospital, certainly better than it is connected now. So, and it gets you a long way to that. It also connects Kohl's and other shopping, plus the side path on Olentangy River Road. Down here is now connected. This now there's a good side path there that gets you into a lot more shopping. So it's a fantastic connection, but it all hinges on the crossing that I circled.
Yeah.
Has to be made
Yeah.
safe. And there's basically there's no compromise on the safety there. You can't say, well, and I warned them, and we kind of joked about the engineers are going to say, make all these level of service arguments about why they'd love to do it, but they can't. And I said, be ready for that, but you cannot give any ground on this. Otherwise, don't build it. I mean, bluntly, do not build it. You're making it worse. The bridges are great, but I would even give up the bridges if you're going to make that crossing dangerous and force everyone to use it.
Yeah.
So the other thing I said is I would love to see that on-street route still maintained and preserved, because it's a great route for many reasons. It may be faster depending on the light timing of that new light. But that's another point I made, is that light timing. It would be unreasonable to have trail users wait 4 minutes for their turn every light cycle or something ridiculous, and then get 10 seconds to cross. You have to give them adequate time and reasonable delay. And right now the delay across Broadway it's like, I don't know, a minute or two. It's really not that bad. So if you're going to route them somewhere new and make a dangerous crossing and make them wait 4 minutes to use it, that's a fail, in my opinion. So I kind of made all those points, and everyone was really receptive and thankful and said, this is really helpful. And so I was glad that I was able to go to that meeting, and I was happy with how well everyone listened and received the information. So I think there is a follow-up presentation to the Clintonville Area Commission about this. I'm not sure if they're going to whittle down their options before they present. And there's also there's now a public meeting scheduled.
Yeah, in the chat, I put in the information there, and Libby, that's probably something worth sharing. I can send that out in an email. I think it's the 20th, 21st.
I've got it copied, and I'll send it to the.
Yeah, it's 21st.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be great for folks to attend that. I've got it on the calendar. Will, did they address at all? I assume they did, that the ability to get underneath that North Broadway bridge. They addressed that at all?
Yeah, they talked about it and explained why it really wasn't possible. I don't remember the details, but people asked about that, and they had looked at it, and I can't remember. I think there was another variation that it crossed the river, and then it went somewhere around there. It went like under, or it wasn't a variation that was appealing. I think I think it would require basically rebuilding that bridge or something. I can't remember why it was ruled out, but it didn't seem like there was any going under the bridge options that didn't involve major reconstruction of the bridge.
I've always been told it's too low that you couldn't get a trail underneath there, but I just was curious if they talked about that.
Yeah, it was talked about at length. It was clear that they had looked into it. So overall, it seems like it's a good project. It also seems like they understand the importance of that crossing safety, and that they were saying things like, you'd be surprised at, like someone from public service said, well, we're not using level of service as a mandatory priority now. And someone else said something to the effect of, traffic engineers are more open to to less level of service. I can't remember the exact words, but basically,
Yeah.
like things have changed,
Yeah.
which I've heard many times. But it was good that awareness was there. I felt like they're not blind to it, and they're not trying to sweep it under the rug.
Did the south side of the bridge in terms of sidewalk come up at all?
No, I don't think.
Okay.
I don't remember. Maybe tangentially, but
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I've heard so many conversations about that I don't remember if I heard
Yeah.
one in that meeting. Certainly, there's awareness, and I think maybe in that meeting that a proper sidewalk on that side is warranted. I don't think it was part of this project.
Yeah. That's a good update, and it's good to know what was, what the input was, and maybe some things that they didn't talk about, or we should bring up when they have the meeting again here, January 21st. So, all in all, I agree the connectivity gains here are huge, but that intersection crossing has to be world, A plus. It can't be anything less, or no one's going to use it.
Right. I mean, people will use it, but there'll be dangerous situations.
Yeah.
So I forgot what I was going to say. Something related to and like the point I made about don't do the project if you can't make it safe was just to really emphasize, like, at some point these bridges are so much value, you'd have to seriously weigh that and say maybe
Yeah.
the blue thing that exists. But like, I just really wanted to highlight, you're not improving things if you fail on that intersection.
Yeah. Which was designed first and foremost for automobiles, right? So.
Oh yeah, it's freeway entrance ramps and a major industrial or business exit,
Yeah.
parking and business exit.
Yeah.
And it's 100% automobile designed. You're going to try to shove in a pedestrian crossing. The crossing distance is huge. We also talked about putting some kind of median in there, which I think they even offered that up.
Yeah,
I pointed out the
as
crossing,
opposed to the striping. Yeah.
like a physical concrete median. I pointed out that the crossing at Spring and Long at the end of the trail, right before it goes into downtown, is an example of how not to do it.
Yep.
Like, that's just, every time I go there, I'm like head on a swivel, like in combat mode, because anyway, so I was like, don't build it like that. That would be the wrong way to build it.
You're absolutely right. You definitely have to make eye contact with everybody when you're going through that, because all sorts of people are trying to get through there.
Well, eye contact doesn't even work. Like, you have to treat it like a combat situation, and if there's threats moving your way, i.e. cars that are coming across your space, you have to avoid them.
So you think you'd be willing to maybe put instead of striping, a true median here?
Yeah, right, because that crossing is huge. It's really wide.
Yeah.
It's going to take a long time to cross, and you're out in the middle. You're super vulnerable. Even if the signalization says that you're not allowed to turn, people will still turn. And so you're super vulnerable for a long period of time with no safety, with no refuge. You have nowhere to go. If a car starts moving towards you, which way do you go for safety? You could misjudge it and go the wrong way. And the car's still, like, even if you see the car and try to get out of the way. So you need smaller, so a physical median would help. It gives you someplace to run to. I mean, to be perfectly blunt.
Could you square off the intersection to slow down traffic around that turn, and then in the
it's these guys. Yeah.
Yeah, square that off and then put the crossing there. because that's a very, I mean, it's, as you mentioned, it's designed for cars, right? So
Right.
if you square off those intersections, that does two things. One, it creates a little more space for a bike ped path to come in, and it could create even a space for a green box or a bike box. The other thing it does too is it slows down traffic making that turn, right? They don't, because that's a long enough on ramp that they don't need to gun it going around that turn in order to get speed to get onto the 315. If they are,
Right,
they,
these are all good points. The engineers will, of course, scrape level of service, and they have their circumferences that they have to build to for free flow of traffic. But you have very good points. That would be another way to shorten the crossing distance. Also, people are going to sit in the middle of the crosswalk, forcing someone who's walking or biking this difficult decision. Do I go right in front of the car into their blind spot and possibly get hit as they gun it? Or should I squeeze between cars? So you have to move all the cars back and move the stop line back. And
Yeah.
and anyway, I don't want to get into the engineering details or how many ways they could and will screw it up. But I just emphasize they need to seriously look at it.
Yeah. I think that's dead on, especially.
That red car is a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly.
Right in the crosswalk.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're crossing there, you're worried about those cars to the right, and now you have to deal with that red car. And where are you going to go if you're walking?
And he's looking this way for oncoming traffic now.
Right, he's not looking for you. It's not that he's a jerk.
Yeah.
He's put in a bad situation too. The engineers are the ones that are jerks.
Yeah.
There, I said it. I'm sorry I said it out loud, but I truly believe it because they're designing for one metro.
Well, yeah, and this intersection is going to require a retrofit, and it's too bad that the bike stuff wasn't on the table at the same time that the road was getting designed, because I think if it had been, we would have had an easier conversation about both the bike path and the sidewalk. So
right,
We tried.
I know, I didn't. We shouted pretty loud. No, not casting any aspersions to anyone.
No, yeah.
On this
just
side of the
weren't
equation.
listening.
No, they were thinking of jobs.
it's happening now, which is good.
Yeah.
So is there going to be I think there is a presentation to the Clintonville Area Commission about this.
I
Libby, do you
if
know
that's
anything?
on. I don't know if that's on the agenda. I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
But I will, definitely want to get the word out about that meeting on the 21st, and I'll check I don't know. I don't think an agenda has been shared for next month yet. Libby, has it?
No, it hasn't.
Okay. So it's
I think the
possible
city
it's
is
on
going to come to present this to the commission at some point.
Okay.
Commissioner White says that she hasn't been contacted yet by anybody to get into the agenda.
Okay. Well, maybe they're waiting until after the public meeting and then coming in February, perhaps. But anyway, I will send an email note around to everybody, but it's also in the chat that meeting is coming up on the 21st. So, Will, thanks for the report out on that.
Sure. My pleasure.
We got to keep our heads in this one and make sure that the decisions made are the right ones. So I appreciate that. Anything else for this week or this meeting this month?
Hey, is there any action on the first responders memorial?
That's a great question.
Oh, Libby doesn't seem to like that question.
No. To be brief. And the whole tree thing just seems to be at a standstill. No, I mean, I've attended every meeting I can. I've contacted people. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and maybe refresh that email chain because I think we got sent around a couple of different people, Libby, or you had.
Yeah.
So we can regroup on that.
And several of them have changed and are no longer there. And then they've been into the whole tree canopy thing and what was the big thing, big meeting over at on the west side of Olentangy with trees and all of that. And it just seems like the right hand and the left hand don't know what's happening. And yeah, we like trees, but we're not ready to do anything. So that's what I hear. Please tell me if I'm wrong.
We can, let's dig back to our email, Libby, and see what we can,
Okay,
yeah. We can do.
I'll look at that.
All right. Well, if there's anything else, Zach, thank you so much for the overview of the survey data. I'm really excited to see how that plays out. We'll put the word out, the rest of the week here, and we'll shut it down Monday, and look forward to meeting with you next month in 2021. Hopefully that's a better year than 2020. And we'll go through those results and probably have some more to share on things we learned from the public meeting that's going to take place on the Como Northmore Trail connection. So if I don't talk to you before the new year, please everyone enjoy it. And hopefully everyone's taking some well-deserved time off for the rest of the week.
Thanks, Andrew.
Happy New
Yeah,
Year, everyone.
thanks, Andrew.
All right.
Thanks,
New Year,
Zach.
everyone.
Nice job.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.